Okay, within this video I'm briefly going to talk you through a suggested plan for the essay structure. This is no way a definitive plan, and you are of course free to tackle the essay question how you see fit. The essay question is looking at the policy developments between the Laming Report of 2003 as it relates to Victoria Climbié and the Laming Report of 2009 as it relates to the Baby P tragedy. Now clearly both of these reports related to child protection. The essay is not called Laming and Laming, and that means I do not want a detailed description of what was contained in the 2003 report and a detailed description of what was contained within the 2009 report. I am looking at the journey between these 2 points here. Now, you may choose to look at sources and evidence that talk specifically about child protection, and you might consider the work of writers such as Eileen Munro in order to do this. However, my essay plan will suggest that you cover the policy changes within this period as they relate specifically to 3 particular agendas proposed by the Labour Party, in particular the Every Child Matters agenda. I'm suggesting that you write the 2,000 words of the essay focusing on a combination of both theory and practice. There are 3 theories, if you like, that I'd like you to consider. These are the anti-poverty strategy, the inclusion strategy, and the Every Child Matters strategy of the previous New Labour government. And how were these strategies manifested within the Sure Start programmes and the Extended Schools programmes? So how did these theories, if you like, manifest themselves within these practical, practice-based programmes? And that will help you to make sense of what the implications of some of these strategies are for workers such as yourselves working on the ground directly with children and within these contexts. Of course, something to bear in mind as a practitioner within implementing the Every Child Matters agenda, the Inclusive Society agenda and the Anti-Poverty Strategy agenda is the need for multi-agency working. And we've covered this within other sessions within the course, but you've also covered it in more detail within other modules and in previous years. So what is this theme of the Inclusive Society? Well, in Ruth Levitas's book, The Inclusive Society, she unpicks New Labour's agenda to socially engineer the UK by developing certain services. And some critics, such as Nigel Parton, have called this agenda an attempt at social engineering. So that's theme 1. How did New Labour try to encourage an inclusive society and reduce social exclusion with its policy agenda between the periods 2003 and 2009? Clearly something that you're very familiar with is the Every Child Matters agenda, and there are many writers on this subject. A particular article is this 2009 chapter from Jarrett, the Change for Children agenda, which is hosted on Moodle. Also the 4 journal articles which we've unpicked in a previous session in class, which are critical about the Every Child Matters agenda. And also this question that I want you to consider is, although the Every Child Matters agenda came about as a result of the Climbié inquiry, and the Climbié inquiry was the result of a child death, was Every Child Matters targeting those children that are at risk of serious harm and death? Or was it a method of implementing a much wider social agenda, the type of agenda suggested by Levitas? Hence, when we're talking laming to laming, which are essentially reports about child protection, or is the majority of policy in that period relating to social engineering and child welfare, and I'm hinting that most of the policy relates to child welfare, but you may choose to just look at developments within the child protection arena between 2003 and 2009. The anti-poverty strategy, an attempt of the new Labour government to reduce child poverty. These targets have not been met and will seem to be overly ambitious. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation has systematically reviewed this strategy each year for the last 13 years, and the most recent 2010 report is hosted on Moodle. There's been previous debate and discussion in the sessions of how child protection and poverty might be related. Are child protection services aimed at children living in poverty? Should our child protection system be more adept at focusing on more affluent families? What is the reason that we do not focus services on more affluent families? Do we make assumptions about the relationship between poverty and child protection? Similarly, how are poverty and children in need related? Is a child in need always a child in poverty? Or can a child be in need when coming from an affluent family? And we've unpicked some of that discussion in class. Both within the children in need agenda and the child protection agenda and policy of the last 10 years or so, there's been a move towards what is called the preventative agenda, that services should be instigated much earlier within a family's difficulties. That intervention should take place before crisis point is reached. And we looked at some data from Melhuish that says for every pound, or the equivalent rather, of every pound that is spent on welfare or preventative services saves £7, or the equivalent, in protection or remedial based services. The Children Act 1989 makes a clear distinction between a child's welfare needs and a child's protection needs. Social workers have traditionally been the profession that have made assessments and provision for children's welfare needs and protection needs. However, with the Every Child Matters agenda and the subsequent Children Act 2004, it might be said that the responsibility expanded from just social workers to include all of the children's workforce. And we'll have a look at how that was achieved, or partly achieved through certain sections in the Children Act 2004. So two implications of the Children Act 2004 were that no longer was there this divide between the thresholds of what was constituted to be welfare, what was considered to be welfare and what was considered to be child protection. There was more of a continuum between welfare and child protection. And along with this idea that there is a continuum between welfare and protection is a similar idea that the responsibility for welfare and protection is the responsibility of all practitioners, not just social workers. So we have what is an expansionist preventative agenda. As I've said, the Children Act distinguishes between children in need within Section 17 and children likely to suffer significant harm or have suffered significant harm under Section 47 of the Act. And this Act is still in force, as are these sections, as they relate to much of the work of social services. However, the implementation of the 2004 Children Act introduced this statutory provision that agencies need to cooperate to improve the well-being, or the welfare if you like, of children. So to cooperate to promote welfare or well-being, but also a duty to cooperate to make safeguarding arrangements. So this expanded the scope of legal provision and the duties placed on professionals. No longer just social workers, but all professionals under these two sections. So clearly, the implications of those two sections are a need to continue and to develop multi-agency working. And this idea of multi-agency working, as seen here and here on the second slide, should be a continuing theme that you make reference to throughout the essay. Much of the literature on multi-agency working predates this 2004 Act, and much of the analysis and discussion of what constitutes good practice actually still holds true today. But you might want to look at the Rita Cheminée book from 2009, where she unpicks the benefits and challenges of multi-agency working. And the development of multi-agency working has been a key theme between 2003 and 2009. So that's the theory, if you like, the theories of the anti-poverty strategy, the inclusion strategy, Every Child Matters, and multi-agency working. But how do these strategies and the challenge and benefits of multi-agency working appear in practice? So I'm suggesting here that you use the practical examples of Sure Start as a multi-agency initiative and Extended Schools as a multi-agency initiative aimed at tackling social exclusion, poverty, and to promote the Every Child Matters agenda within these services. Throughout your essay, you should be critical of Every Child Matters and the policy agenda. Try to see beyond surface appreciations of what the policy is around. Try and see some of the challenges of actually making some of the ideas operational, and we've discussed some of those, and it's kind of like saying, oh, that's okay in theory, but in practice it looks like this. And we discussed in detail in a previous session how the provisions of the 1988 Educational Reform Act and league tables and SATs and testing, for example, seem to be directly opposed to the holistic policy of Every Child Matters. Quite simply, this policy is saying every child matters, wherein the provisions of the 1988 Act and subsequent policies are only children that are high academic achievers matter. You should make reference to the Children's Plan, as it is the umbrella above Every Child Matters. So please make reference to the Children's Plan. And then we have the 2010 Centre for Policy Studies, which is a conservative think tank's proposals for cutting the spending in the Children's Plan. And they particularly look at approaches to modernising Sure Start, but also modernising Extended Schools. And I kind of want you to think about what the social welfare and child protection implications might be of changing Sure Start and changing the Extended Schools programme as recommended by the CPS. To give you some sort of idea of context of that, Claire James in Family Trends from 2009 writes about the effect of recession on families and welfare within families. And this might give you some predictive idea perhaps of what some of the consequences of these cuts might involve for families. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball, and we cannot really say with any great degree of confidence what will happen. We can only make suggestions in a predictive conclusion to the essay of what the implications of policy changes might look like and impact on children in the future. So I hope that's made some sense and give you some sense of one way in which to approach the essay. It is only one way, but I kind of see the anti-poverty strategy and the inclusion strategy of the Labour government that predates the ECM agenda as being quite a driver for all the policy that came out within 2000 to 2010. It manifests quite clearly in the Every Child Matters agenda and also within some of the safeguarding provisions.